things that have been happening. Rivers turning red, blood red.
Hello, and welcome to the Son of Man Show. I have a special guest here.
Hello, everybody. I'm Aaron.
All right, so we're going to talk about a few topics. One of them is the Shroud of Turin. Hello, welcome back to the Son of Man Show. I want to do today's episode because I feel like while there are those who abuse their power and law enforcement and their authority, there are also a very large percentage who are just doing their job. They're going out and prepared to face the ultimate risk. Hello, and welcome back to the Son of Man Show. So today's episode is called In the Beginning because naturally we have to start at the beginning when comparing the similarities to all these religions. And I say all religions, but I did not incorporate all religions into this because that would just be too lengthy for the sake of time and knowledge and whatever benefits. Keep it kind of short. But in my book, I will get more into detail or more in depth with this. However, today we're gonna just talk about the creation amongst some of the most common world religions. I'm gonna start by explaining three kind of archetypes of creation stories. Number one is creation from chaos, which is everything exists in a chaotic, water-like, primordial, dimensionless state, a void or an abyss, and order sprang forth to create balance amongst that. Order representing good in the story and chaos representing evil in the story. And that is creation from chaos. And then there is the world parent or the world parents. And the world parent divides himself up or dismembers himself and becomes all of the elements of nature and creation, the cosmos, and everything down to mankind. That deity would himself be creation itself, just fragmented into everything that exists, which is pretty cool. And then there's the world parents who in their union and then separation create everything out of it. They lay the foundation for creation through that. Lastly, there is the Earth Diver creation story, which is common among Native Americans and also spread through parts of, I believe, eastern Siberia. The Earth Diver story is about spiritual beings who are sleeping in a primordial state, and one awakens first and comes down to map out and lay the foundations for creation. So those are the three main types of creation stories. You may see how they come into play as we begin to go through some of these. Almost all incorporate a watery-like beginning, chaos and darkness, and a void of some sort. So almost all have this. So we're going to start with ancient Egyptian religion, and it is order from chaos. It starts with a primordial ocean of darkness and chaos, and then Ra, or the sunlight. This begins to form a dry space in that primordial ocean. This dry place is marked as the beginning of creation. Okay, so I have here an ancient Egyptian relief depicting the creation story. On the ground you'll have Geb or Nut. And then up above, you'll see the star-figured woman. This is Mat, who is the depiction of the heavens above. They believed that the sunlight, or Ra, formed first out of a dark primordial water, or sea. And this formed the first dry space in that primordial ocean. And this marks the beginning of creation for them. There is a sort of world parent also with this creation out of chaos story, as you have the different characters, Geb and Nut and Mat. It's also said to be, their creation story is said to be a hidden aspect of the god Amen. So there is even more of a connection to a creation from chaos story with the ancient Egyptian accounts, because they also have the brothers Osiris and Set. And Set is said to represent chaos and destruction, and Osiris is said to represent life, rebirth, and order. So we also have that as an element to it. One thing I will note already is that it seems like the ancient Egyptian account is not all that different from the Christian account. If you are thinking about it in similarities, there are many to find, such as a dark primordial sea or expanse, light being first, and then this creating a dry space, which makes way for life. And then you have order from chaos, which is the next logical step to deal with. So let's just keep that in mind as we go and move on. Now we're moving on to Greek mythology. And in the beginning was chaos and a gaping void. This void encompassed the entire universe. The void was surrounded by an unending stream of water ruled by the god Oceanus. This being in the domain of the goddess named Eurynomy, which meant far ruling or wide wandering. She was the goddess of all things and desired to make order out of the chaos. She then couples with a huge snake named Ophion. Other legends say the north wind, which she gave birth to Euros, the god of love, also known as a protagonist, the firstborn. Eurynomy separated the sky from the sea. She did so by jumping or dancing on this primordial ocean. This caused the creation of the great lands. It goes on to describe, what it was populated with and all of that, but that's not why we're here today. So, also born from this chaos was Geisha, or Earth, or Mother Earth, the embodiment of the skies and the heavens, as well as Tartarus, god of the sunless and terrible region beneath the earth. So basically, everything in Greek mythology takes creation itself and elements or aspects, and they turn those aspects into gods or goddesses to represent this in the story. We find the same thing. It's very similar to the ancient Egyptian account if you really take into consideration that. It comes from chaos. It starts in a primordial ocean or water or sea. There's light that breaks forth, the ground shows, and creation begins. There's a separation from heaven and earth. Over and over again, through these ancient world religions, we find a separation from heaven and earth. And this separation, I believe, is the atmosphere forming that protective layer over the earth itself. And this is what we find here. I won't get into the characters so much right now because we have still a segment to go on Messiah figures. I will point out she's noted as being surrounded by or hooking up with a giant snake. This giant snake also plays a major role throughout every major world religion, just about, and has its places early on here, even in the creation stories. And I'll get into that a little bit later on as well. So that is the Greek creation story, at least a bit of it. It separates once again, like I said, into further and further details by separating it into different gods and goddesses in order to represent these elements and the separation of things and the creation itself. But roughly has the same beginnings. Starts with chaos, darkness, and a primordial ocean or a water of some sort, and then light and dry land break forth and things begin to grow. So the next portion is Hindu creation myths that we're getting into, and there are many different types of creation stories retold throughout the Vedic sources and the Hindu religion. I'm not going to try to chase down every single one, but I'll focus on some of the main ones that I know of. So one is that Lord Vishnu slept on the coils of a huge primordial serpent, which is depicted as a cobra often. The snake was said to be his protector while he sleeps. And this, of course, before anything was ever made. So already we have the darkness of consciousness. He's asleep, and he's in this primordial state, asleep on this snake, his giant coils. And there is a quote I have here. It says, "The darkness hid the darkness with no distinguishing sign. All this was water. The life force was covered with emptiness. That one arose with the power of heat." Now, some stories have Brahma grow out of Vishnu because Vishnu gets lonely and he splits himself in two in order to create a male and a female figure. So immediately we begin with the supreme deity, which is Vishnu in this story, and Brahma springing forth from him, which would be another form of, or another emanation of Vishnu himself. And then we have Brahma splitting himself in two so that he can have a male and a female counterpart there. So we have the creation of mankind, and it's kind of showing you how it works. It's a singular deity, so it's kind of like the singular parent God who's dividing himself up into the different aspects that will be all of creation itself. I find it interesting that the quote from the Vedic source says that all this was water, and the life force was covered with emptiness, and it was in darkness, hid the darkness. Is very, very reminiscent of Christian scripture, where it says darkness covered the face of the earth, and there was, it talks about this void. So that's interesting to me. There are some stories where Vishnu himself directly orders Brahma to create, and so then he begins creation. In Hinduism, there is one supreme deity whom out of comes everything that exists, including the other gods and the goddesses. So just to recap, there's many different forms of the different parts of creation in the Vedic and cultural stories, though many, it seems, spring out of a primordial state in the beginning with nothing formed and a supreme God who begins the creation. Another thing that stands out to me as we go through these stories is that most start with darkness, without light. Again, many state that it is watery like or some kind of primordial soup. Okay, so now we're in the Buddhist creation story. They don't really have a creation story since they instead believe in a constant state of death and rebirth, even in the universe. They believe that man and nature are all part of the eternal existence, and that the place one goes in death is the place between. I'm no expert on the Buddhist religion, but from what I could gather from sources online, it seemed to me more about consciousness and spirituality than about some kind of deity or creation or some chaotic accident that brings everything to be. Instead, it seems like it's a like God in Buddhism is all things being realized in this conscious material existence. So instead of God creating, God is creation. I said I would focus on the similarities, and there are some things worth discussing. The things for me here isn't so much in the story of God creating himself, but that God is somehow found in creation. There are many times throughout the Old Testament where it's said that the creation itself declares His majesty. A verse that comes to mind found in the Gospel of Thomas, though I believe that's a part of the Apocrypha, where Jesus says, "Split wood and I am there, lift up the rock and you will find me there." These have a certain implication about God having a oneness with His creation. So, in summary, most of these religions, it appears, hold a lot of similar values in the stories, or at least similar aspects to their stories. It seems to me like you could tie connections to pretty much all the major world religions in ancient times, and seem like they were pretty on track with one another. So this is just the beginning, guys, and I know it's kind of a little bit boring, but just bear with me because we're going to get into cooler stuff. But this, I had to break it in somehow, and this is the beginning, so had to start with the creation stories. And I think you guys will agree that for the most part, most of these are pretty similar. If you're looking for distinct truths that you are masking in a story in order to pass it down from generation to generation and make sure that that shared humanity's past gets passed on as knowledge to the future generations. Seems like they were doing a pretty good job of that as we have all this information today. So that's it for this first half, and next time we're going to be talking about the Great Flood story and how that impacted a lot of the world that we know today. We'll be also covering the Messiahs or the Savior figures and most of the world religions. I hope these next couple episodes are going to be funner, because this one was kind of boring for me, I'll admit it, just kind of dredging through the same story over and over and over again. And as we're looking for the similarities, I know I'm going to find that time and time again. It's just that Genesis lays out the creation story for me just about as clear cut as you can get it. And all these are just the same thing. It's just being retold time and time again. So thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for being patient, guys. And I hope to be able to bring you guys the rest of them. And hopefully I can get you guys to stick with me through the rest of this. I hope you guys are learning something also. I hope you're getting something out of this. Maybe you didn't know before. So peace, love, positivity. See you guys on the next episode.